It is so exciting to be here in this room with all of you knitters and knitter wannabes. I'm thinking if you want to knit, this is the place to be. I'm the chair of the Institute of Island Studies, and I also teach in the Master of Arts and Island Studies program. We designed this idea for Yarns and Yarns through a Northern and Arctic Island Studies Research Thematic Network of the University of the Arctic. We were casting about for ideas that would draw together people from all around the North Atlantic, and we hit upon knitting and storytelling, best yarns and yarns. And this is the fourth one we've done. The others were in St. John's, Newfoundland, came from Uist in Scotland, and then Holar in Iceland. And so we're really pleased to be the fourth. And after this, the excitement of this one, my friend Andrew in Shetland says that they're lining up to do more. I'm going to pass it over to Andrew, and he's going to say a few words from Shetland, and I'm going to come back and tell you one story before handing it over to Cheryl. Andrew.
Hi, Laurie. It's great to see you, and it's great to see everyone else. This looks as if it's going to be the biggest and the best yet of the Yarns and Yarns events. As Laurie said, this is part of the University of the Arctic Thematic Network, a series of events. We've been working together to try and develop research projects which will hopefully come to fruition soon, including people from Finland right across to Greenland and Canada. But as part of the thematic network, the Northern and Atlantic Island Research Thematic Network, we also want to just engage with folk who live in the islands and other parts of the world who are interested in the history and culture of these wonderful places. And knitting seems to be a shared passion across the North. So I'm not going to say any more. It's really good and exciting to see so many passionate people there with your knitting pins working away. Unfortunately, I don't have mine with me today. I usually have it, but it's been left in my other house. So I'll just have to watch everyone else do it and to hear some stories from Laurie and from others. So welcome. It's great to see you all.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Yes, and he does usually knit. I'm knitting too. Where'd it go? Yep. Dishcloths, that's about all I can do these days, but they're really fun, especially as it comes up to Christmas. But I want to tell the story of this sweater. Years ago, 5 years ago, I was in Iceland, and I was visiting Laube, who's on screen today in Holar, and I used to knit a lot, and I had great ambitions. I saw all these beautiful Icelandic sweaters, and I really wanted one. I thought, I can knit one. I know I can knit one, and Laube convinced me that I could knit one, and she told me where to go to get the cheapest yarn, which was at a grocery store in Blondos. And we were just driving back through from Holar to back to Reykjavik via Blondos, so we stopped into the grocery store. I bought enough yarn for 2 beautiful Icelandic sweaters, and I think this is the Icelandic Lopi. Well, that was 5 years ago. Oh yes, I thought I was going to be able to knit this sweater, and it sat there for 4.5 years with me not knitting the sweater. Finally, I convinced my friend, Pamela Swinson, who's also on this call today, who is originally her grandparents from Iceland. She has knit many Icelandic sweaters. So I said, Pam, the 4-syllable, Pam, can you take my yarn and make me a sweater? And she did. And so I received it about a month ago. It is absolutely gorgeous. And according to Icelandic tradition, your Icelandic sweater should be knit by a friend and given to you with love. And I really feel when I wear it that I have been given a great big hug from my friend Pamela and Laube as well. I think of you all the time for encouraging me to try to knit. Maybe next 10 years, we'll see. Anyway, I would like now to pass it over to Cheryl Wartman, who is going to be the mistress of ceremonies for the rest of the afternoon or the next hour to share some stories and get us all knitting. Thank you, Cheryl.
Hi. So I'm Cheryl Wartman. I'm a student in the Masters of Island Studies program. And because we're all knitters here, I'm going to start with I'm wearing the Sunday cardigan by the Petite Knits. It's knit in Fleece and Harmony signature yarn in the, what color? Pumpkin colorway. And then it's held together with kid silk haze mohair as well. So it's quite warm, so it will come off eventually in the middle of this top. And today I want to share a story about fishing mitts that my grandmother told me for my island history project when I was in grade 12. So aging myself, that was 1991 that I did this project. So you'll see some old pictures of me there. So while you're getting that up, I'm going to show off the hat my grandmother knit that I found in my stash. My grandfather used to wear these. They were in the 90s, late 90s. A lot of people wore them. So some people would put plastic in here. The grandma didn't. She just knit them. So I'll pass it around. It's kind of helpful. Okay, so knitting fishing mitts on Prince Edward Island. Now I wanted to start this, I'm sorry the slideshow's not great for those of you back here, but as you can see it's kind of a dory with a sail that they used. So you could wear big mittens without worrying about them getting kind of caught in fishing gear or winding gear, like they would today. So these are the fishing mitts I'm going to talk about today. And so, of course, we'll start with where we are, which everybody here knows. We're in Prince Edward Island, Canada's smallest province in the Atlantic provinces of Canada. All right. So this is my grandmother would turn over in her grave, seeing this picture there. She didn't like her picture taken. This was, she did this with me and let me take her picture and record her because I was doing something for school. So I remember helping my grandmother at 3 or 4 knit. I would pick up her knitting from her bag in the corner and help her knit whatever project she had, and she never said a word to me. If my kids picked up whatever I was knitting and helped, I don't know if I would have been so patient. So in 91, as I said, I took an island history course, so we needed a craft project. So we did the project on fishing nets. And I talked through the project on making wool from fleece, and I go through that here, where you would shear the sheep in May, and then they'd wash the wool sometime in the summer. When it was a nice day, they'd wash it on warm days so it would dry really well. Then they'd card it, and they'd spin it, and I'll talk, there's a few pictures I'll talk through on that. So I decided, when we talked about yarns and yarns, I was going to do this. Of course, you know, people who know me know that I do things kind of last minute. So I thought, well, I'll just grab some wool from my stash and knit up 2, which are they, right mitts. So I knit up 2 right mitts, and then I wanted to felt one and leave one large, so you see what would happen. This is very small, like it's going to felt a lot more than this. You can still see kind of yarn, you can see stitch definition still in that. So it's still not felted as much as they would felt if you were using them. But I made a mistake. You're not allowed to wear dark colors in the boat. According to tradition, you only knit fishing mitts in white. So the white color there, or the off-white color, would be the color. So these would never see a boat because they have gray and brown.
Just trying to move the mic closer to you.
Oh, I'm wandering too much. Sorry. That happens with me.
Is that still working?
Yeah. So if you can flip to the next slide there, and I'll pass these around so you can see the difference. So I went to, how was it, Teresa's house at the spinning wheel? Yeah, sorry, my mother's here, so I'm terrified. Which my grandmother's sister, Teresa, had the spinning wheel. So I went to Teresa's house to see the spinning wheel, and she set it up for me. Not, she didn't actually actually spin, but if you click again, we'll go to the next one. So she put actual already spun yarn on the wheel, and then if you click again, you can see how it's wound through the wheel. I'm not a spinner. Anyone who's a spinner will look at this and say, yeah, it's not quite the way it goes. And this is called the jack reel. And what the jack reel would do would be allow them to take the yarn off the bobbin and put it into a skein. And what they did to me as 18 years old, as I was doing this, I wound it, wound it, wound it. Every 100 times it cracks. It sounds like the thing is going to break apart. I thought I broke this thing, but what they do is for every 300 rounds, that would be a skein. So that was how you would draw it. So if we go to the next picture there, you can see me winding. Oh, I guess you can't quite see it, but you see these winding up the skein, which we still do today. And then the last one is taking the skein back apart again and putting it on Swift, thank you. The Swift to wind up balls of yarn. So if you go to the last picture, what you'll see is 2 balls of yarn, one that I wound from the back of the chair, or like my mom used to have us hold our hands while we wound them. So, and you can see how you can wind a much tighter ball from the Swift. I think that's, so then I pulled a pair of mitts that are in the exact right color off the web. The interesting thing here is you can note that she makes the thumb differently than I made the thumb of the mitts. And my grandmother told me they used to be able to tell whose mitts got left at the church by how the mitts were knit. So they would know which family the mitts would belong to just because everybody had a signature way of doing things. So I think, did I stay within the 10 minutes?
I think so.
Yes.
Where are they open at the top of the?
Oh, sorry.
And yeah, Cheryl, can you pass them and put them right in front of the screen so people can see it online? Thank you.
So if you see the mitts here, they have a hole at the top of the mitt and at the top of the thumb. And you can see the hole stays open once they're felted. So what happens when you're fishing is that these get soaked. So they're absolutely filled with water. But as they felt, the water doesn't pour out through the fabric. So they want it to pour out the ends of the mitts so that they could still work even though the mitts were soaked. And the nice thing about wool is that it will stay warm even when it's soaked through. The other part of it is if you felt these with salt, the salt also makes the wool like less porous so that the water has to go out somewhere. So that's why. But once people started hauling with electric haulers and things like that, these mitts became a problem because they would get caught in things. My grandfather told the story of one old guy, old fisherman he called him, liked his mitts to be down to about his ankles when he held his hand here, because he'd use it to keep his face warm when he was out as well. So those are the okay. So thank you very much. Are there any other questions? One time. All right. Next, yes. So next, yes.
Why white?
It was tradition, it's a superstition. It was just like not having women in the boat, which was a superstition. You didn't take women into the boat. You had to have white mitts. So you would always.
Cheryl, what was it? Oh, microphone and repeat the question.
So the question was why white mitts? And it was just a superstition because that was, you would take your white fleece and use it for these mitts before you would do anything else with it. Okay?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Yes.
If I stand up, can you hear me?
We can try.
Yeah, okay. I used to knit fishing mittens for my brother-in-law who worked as what we call a cork.
Yeah.
Helper on the lobster boat every May and June. And when they would start fishing, it would be quite cold. So to make the mittens waterproof, they actually just dipped them in the water and got them wet on purpose.
Yeah.
And by the time they got out to their lines, the mittens were frozen and then they were impermeable.
Yeah, and then the water would go, yeah. Great. Good, so, over to
One more question.
One more
What
question.
sheep breed do you use for the yarn?
whatever sheep breed the family had. What was tradition here? Does anyone know? Kim, do you know?
Probably Suffolk or.
Suffolk,
or something like
probably,
that. One
or
of the older breeds.
one of the older breeds, but I'm not exactly sure which one.
And a mix.
And a mix, yeah. Yeah, they kind of became Heinz 57, but yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on to Kim from Fleece and Harmony. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, or is that, can you see Kim there?
Do you want me to go there? Stand up?
I think that's
That's
okay.
okay?
What do
Okay.
people, you can see her there, okay? There we go. There,
All
you
right.
good? Yeah, okay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kim Doherty Smith, and I actually own a mini mill in Belfast, Prince Edward Island. And so the Belfast Mini Mills is a company that's here on Prince Edward Island that makes cottage-size milling equipment, and I think they're in 48 different countries now, so these mills are around the world. They happen to, the manufacturing facility happens to be about 7 kilometers away from my sheep farm, so I have a Belfast Mini Mill. Like to say, if you want local, it's all local. We can't get more local than that. And we have a small flock of sheep that are crosses now because we started out with Borydale and we had a Texel Ram at one point, but as the flock mingled with each other, we end up we've got a Highlands 57 flock. And we use our mini mill to spin almost exclusively wool that we gather from Prince Edward Island farms. The most common sheep breed here now is Rideau Arcot, which is a breed of sheep that was developed by the Department of Agriculture for Canada in around the early 80s. And they were looking for a sheep breed that was very prolific. So many of these ewes from the Rideau Arcot, if the farmer is like really paying attention to the nutrition and everything, they're actually, they have litters instead of singles or twins. So they can have 4, 5, or 6 lambs a shot. And so nutrition is really very important if you're going to go into that, have that kind of a breeding program. But when we opened the mill in 2017, we made our mission statement that we would spin locally sourced fiber. And luckily for us, we had no idea how Rideau Arcot fiber would be in hand knitting yarns, because that's what we're making. We're making yarn for hand knitting. Lucky for us, it's lovely wool for hand knitting yarn. It is quite white, and it also has a little bit of luster to it, so it's not a matte finish that you get with the wool. And we spin that for all of the yarns that we make in the mill. I do have a sample of it here, so unfortunately we can't zoom it around, but I'll just show you. This has been washed, the first wash, and we don't get braided wool. We get the wool just right off the farm, and we braid and sort it here. And this is the first wash, so I'll just put that up to the camera, and then I'll pass it around. So you can see it kind of has still has a little bit of a gray tinge to it, and there's some vegetation in it. So we scour our wool with kind of a gentle detergent. So I'm going to put this in the bag and then pass it around because it's so some of the big industrial size mills use scouring soap, if you want, that actually dissolves the vegetation, and we don't do that. Ours is like a pH balance scour. So we have to remove that vegetation manually, and we use that with a machine that we call the fiber separator, and that allows the vegetation to shake out. But we tell our customers that don't worry, every skein of yarn comes with complementary vegetation, and we don't charge you extra for that. And so after the process, surprisingly, is the same exact steps that your grandparents or your great-grandparents would have used. So we have to, the sheep have to be shorn, the wool is collected, it all needs to be washed. Then we start the process. And you have to, so we do the first thing that we do is a picker that after the wool is washed. So we will take that wool like I showed you, and it goes into a machine that has a series of combs that are quite large, and that just breaks apart the staple. So when wool comes off the sheep, it creates like a little tip on the end. There's a little tip on the end, and that holds the staple of the wool together, and the picker actually opens up that staple so that you're starting to get individual fibers. We then send our wool to the fiber separator, which is has a bunch of rollers with needles on it, and that actually further combs the fiber, and any large pieces of vegetation that may still be in there drop out at the bottom of the machine. And then finally the wool is ready to go to the carder, so we would card. So in the old days, you would use hand carders and work the wool until you get the fibers all lined up. We have a machine, a mechanical carder that has 7 different combing drums in it. And when it comes out of that, it comes out as what most people would know as a roving. We call it a sliver in the mill. And it's just a stream of fiber that's about an inch wide in our case. And that is kind of, the fibers are sort of organized. It's not like when you buy comb top like fine merino. It is a little bit, it's a bit of a mix between a woolen preparation and a worsted preparation. And then we start drafting that, and we do a couple more steps, and then finally the wool is ready to go to the spinner. And we have 2 spinners. We have a lace weight spinner, so we can make yarns that are, we have a 2-ply lace yarn that is 500 yards to 80 grams, so it's pretty fine. And we do a lot of soft weight yarns as well, which is light fingering. And you can go do that all the way up to a traditional Loki style yarn, which is just lightly twisted and quite heavy. So that's what we're doing in our mill. I just brought a couple dyed skeins because we hand dye everything. So once the yarn has been made, then we put it in a skein or a hank, and then we hand dye all of the skeins using a dye that was developed by an owner of another mini mill in Connecticut, actually. And the dyes are heavy metal free. So it's an acid dye, but it is heavy metal free, so it has good color fast and properties, but it doesn't have any heavy metals in it. So because of the nature of our wool, because it's kind of a mix of different grades and so forth, it doesn't really take the dye evenly when you hand dye it afterwards. So even if we say we have a solid color, it does have variation in the wool as well. So I just brought a couple skeins just to show you the different things that we do, and I'll just show them here. So we can get some pretty rich colors, and we do that. And then we also sell quite a lot of natural white as well. Yeah, you can just pass it around. We also are there's 3 of us that are doing mostly the work in the mill, and we also really like a lot of the Nordic knitting and Selbu around I'm on a particular Selbu mitten kick right now from Norway. And so we found a flock of sheep, another flock of sheep on Prince Edward Island, which they live in a place called Wild Wind Pasture. That's the name of the farm. And they're a bit of a outlier as far as North American flocks go because they live outside all year round. In fact, the farmer doesn't even own a barn. So he has beautiful, well-maintained hedgerows on his farm with big spruce trees and pine trees, and he's taken the chainsaw and he's removed all of the lower limbs up to about 5 feet, 5.5 feet or 6 feet, and left the canopy very dense. And his sheep actually live in those hedgerows, and they're out all year round. They lamb outside. They're not Rito Arcots because really he needed to procure special breeds that would be hardy enough to be able to live in this situation. And his wool that comes from that flock is completely different from the Rito Arcot wool that we use from the other farms. Has kind of a matte texture to it. And it's a bright white mostly, and we decided we would try to mimic a Norwegian yarn and make that yarn as well. So it's a completely different style of yarn than what we were normally doing, and I love to knit with it because you can do these beautiful color work mittens, and again it's dyed in the same way as we dye our other skeins. So I'll just pass this around as well. Yeah. So that's what we're doing. So it's hyper local, I would say, and but we ship all over the world. So it's really, I think I get the biggest kick out of when we get an order from Australia, because I'm thinking, why, if you're in Australia, would you be ordering yarn from me? But anyway, that's we do ship everywhere. We have a shop on our sheep farm, and the wool that we get from our own sheep. Now it's a small flock. We actually shear that, and in every 2 years of shearing, I have enough wool that I can send it to McCausland's Woolen Mill, which is a mill here on Prince Edward Island that was, I think it started in 1905, and they're running some of the same equipment that they had when they opened the mill. And we have wool blankets made from the wool from our own flock. So that's what we're doing here, and I don't know if anybody has any questions or.
Where is Wild Winds?
Wild Winds Farm. It's on the eastern or the western end of the island.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Milk.
Yes. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a question online, and what kind of sheep do they have at Wild Winds Farm?
It's a mix. So they have North Country Cheviot, and he did introduce some Arcot, but he also, I think it's a whole mix of the old breeds like Dorset and North Country Cheviot and that, because they have to be hardy and they have to have, he doesn't want 4 or 5 lambs in a litter because they're outside. The mothers have to be able to feed them and have enough milk because they're outside. Interestingly enough, though, most farmers on Prince Edward Island lamb. If they're lambing once a year, they'll lamb at the end of March and into April. Adam prefers to lamb early in March or the end of February because when you're coming into April, you have a big chance of having rain here and wind. And if you, even though it seems like it would be colder, if you lamb earlier, it's snow. Most of the precipitation is coming down as snow. And he actually has a better success rate because the lambs have a dense fleece, and as long as it's snow and they can get in under the canopy, I called his hedgerow the Forest Cathedral. When they can get in under there, he has actually a higher success rate with the lambs, and they're safer than they would be in late March or early April when it's wet and windy. Yeah.
You asked the question wondering why you get orders from Australia. Deborah Monk writes back, because Australians love woolly wool.
Yes. So do we. Right. There's no fine merino I know, what I'm dealing with, that's for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
I have a comment from, about the Norwegian wool. Preparing wool in the Norwegian way, their sheep are double coated. So has the wool been spun with both types of wool, long fiber and short, or was the fiber separated before spinning?
Okay, so we, I'll talk, it's not the Norwegian wool that I'm gonna talk about, but we have a small flock of sheep here on Prince Edward Island, they're Icelandic sheep. And they do have a double coat, of course, and when we make Lofi type yarn, we actually leave the long and the short fiber. So we're not separating it. All we're doing is cleaning it, and then we spin with the long and the short together. So the yarn from the Wildland pastures, it doesn't need to be separated because they're not double coated.
Super. Any other questions from the room or from online? All right. Well, thank you so much. That was just so great. And I've heard about you forever. And I've been joining you up in Belfast. And I'm just so pleased to meet you. Thank you. I know we have lots of fans on Prince Edward Island and around the world.
Yeah, yeah.
So now I would like to invite Lynda Harling Stalker to, she's joining us from Antigonish, which is just across the strait from Prince Edward Island and in Nova Scotia. And so she is ready to
There, and are you able to turn on your microphone without us making a big noise?
My mic's on. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. Yay. Got thumbs up. So that's good. So thank you to Lori and Cheryl for organizing this and for everyone joining us today. It's so lovely to see so many of you out there. As said, I'm Lynda Harling Stalker. I'm director of Mulroney Institute of Government here at St. FX. I'm also a professor of sociology. So I'm not sure which is my Monty Python thing. Either this is something completely different or my government work is something completely different. But I'm really happy to be doing this work here today. So my title of my talk is Grammy and Me, Mitten Knitting and Islandness. So this is my grandmother, Kathleen Janie Pickett Roberts, formerly of the Kelvin Grove, Kensington area in Prince Edward Island. She was a strong woman, raising 5 children while working as a teacher. She was a breast cancer survivor in her 30s. Grammy was very practical and knew how to stretch a dollar. I guess you would, raising that number of children. The thing I remember most about Grammy was her quilting and knitting. Much like her, the things she crafted may not have been overly fancy, but they got the job done. Beside her chair in front of the television was a basket that held her knitting. I remember the metal double-pointed needles, always with the project on them, and a variety of balls of wool waiting for her next project. My cousin remembers the beige leather stand-up holding knitting patterns sitting on the small table next to the chair. Rarely did Grammy knit sweaters. Socks, mittens, hats, and slippers were her go-to things. I didn't know you could buy mass-produced mittens until I was about 10 years old, because she would send multiple pairs of mittens each year in the Christmas box for me and my brother to wear. The other important thing to say about Grammy is that she was an islander through and through. Being an islander meant not only not wanting to live somewhere else, but not understanding why you would even want to go anywhere else. She only visited us in Ontario twice, and I think she felt like she was going to a foreign land. As researcher Conkling says, being an islander, incorporating islandness into who you are, is a metaphysical sensation. It is as if Grammy's existence is intertwined with the island, the red soil, the salt air, the potato fields. The island is where she belonged. As Bell Hooks says, there is a sense of meaning and vitality of geographical place that comes with cultures of belonging. Grammy truly belonged on and to PEI. Belonging is experienced and narrated through and by our relationships with culture and materiality. In my research with Newfoundland Outport women, shortly after the cod moratorium, their sense of islandness and sense of belonging was very much narrated through their knitting. The things they knit and the way they spoke about the importance of knitting was central to their identity as Bay women. Knitting salt and pepper caps, trigger mitts, and vamps were all seen as things that Newfoundland women did, and heaven help you if you didn't. Knitting and wool connected islands and locations across the North Atlantic. Shirley Scott and Christine LeGros show how mitten patterns across the North Atlantic were similar. Black/gray and white double ball knits were similar patterns, kissing cousins, if you will. In Canada's Atlantic region, Newfoundland and PEI were connected through wool. Like Grammy's knitting, folklorist Gerald Pocius showed that most of the pre-Confederation mitt knitting in Newfoundland was worked plain with undyed homespun. The men would wear the mittens in the woods, and they would go through so many pairs that plain knitting was more efficient. It was also more efficient for Newfoundland women to neither card their wool nor to weave it. The wool was sent to the mainland, i.e. Prince Edward Island, to Condon wools, where the wool was made into blankets. Condon's is an important but largely untold story about PEI wool. The business started in late 1930, with production commencing in July 1931. It was first located on Queen Street in Charlottetown, later relocating after a fire to Fitzroy Street, and then was demolished in the 2000s. People would send their sheared and cleaned wool to Condon's, where it could be carded, spun, and then turned into knitting wool, or most often woven blankets. Not only did folks from PEI use Condon's, but as we heard, folks from Newfoundland, as well as the Magdalens and into the Boston states would send wool. Condon's did sell knitting wool and patterns, mainly on the island. Grammy, although being a committed acrylic knitter for economy's sake, did use Condon's patterns over the years. They're now a rare commodity. My own sense of islandness and knitting is perhaps more complex than Grammy's. I was born in Charlottetown, but was raised in Ontario. Yearly trips were made to the island as I grew up, and it became a special place of family and the smell of salt air. I wanted to be an islander, but was never sure I was or could be. My passport said I was, but didn't feel right to make that claim. So I did what I could to try to feel like an islander from a distance. I became an Ella Montgomery fanatic at a young age. All spending money went to buying her books, and I would read late in the night under the quilts that Grammy made with a flashlight. I loved the Kevin Sullivan productions of Anne and Road to Avonlea. The island felt like a safe place, and when I arrive on the island, even from just across the Northumberland Strait where I live now, there's a sense of calm and belonging that washes over me. I get much the same sensation with knitting. Around the time that my love of Montgomery started, I taught myself to knit. The old childcraft encyclopedias became my guide and reference. I was a bookworm and needed the visual images. My first project was much like this mitten, only in bright pink, 2 squares knit together. I honed in my craft, learned to make Cabbage Patch doll kids clothing. And by the time I hit high school, I was working in a yarn shop, knitting the popular chunky sweaters of the day. Knitting is central to who I am. My 15 seconds of fame happened while knitting this mitten pattern at the Royal Winter Fair in Toronto. when CTV Toronto broadcast my hands doing their well-rehearsed motions. Grammy always wanted to go to the winter fair, or at least send some of her craft work in. I hope she would have been pleased that I was knitting there. So what is it that brings islands and knitting together? What ties my grandmother and I together? I would argue that both knitting and islands have a sense of enchantment embedded in them. This is not a naive understanding of the word. We all know there are times when the weather comes in on an island and it feels less than enchanting. And when our knitting gets tangled, it's more frustration than anything else. As my colleague Catherine Burnett and I have argued, islands are often articulated as unique, enchanting, and transformative, but also as challenging and limiting, conditioned by both the physicality and the socioeconomics of island places. The materiality of both islandness and cultural work for us is situated within the broader celebratory narratives of small islands as creative and cultural making places. Bennett suggests that such enchantment requires a cultivated form of perception, a discerning, meticulous attentiveness to the singular specificity of things. But furthermore, enchantment is more likely to occur through tangible items, things, or what she would later call vibrant objects. One can never be sure when this object will appear and strike us, the enchantment provoked by a surprise. Knitted items, whether they are similar or unique mittens found on North Atlantic islands, carry with them what Lukeman calls an aura, or what Montgomery might have called the flash. It's the process by which creating happens. Not only is the finished thing important, but how that thing is made and came about. There is an enchanted engagement with making. From Lukeman again, making reminds us of our agency within our physical world. Beyond the practicalness of knitting, knitting was and is a way for women in particular to have agency, to be somewhat creative when various social, cultural, economic, and political conditions can make things more difficult. I think what I inherited from Grammy through our shared talent of knitting is what Adamson calls material intelligence. This is a deep understanding of the material world around us, an ability to read that material environment, and the know-how required to give it new form. Through our knitting, we embed in it what Ingold would call thinginess, a materiality that is indicative of who we are and where we belong. The ubiquitous of mittens on islands take on what Miller would call a humility of things, where objects are important when we do not see them. I didn't see the mittens Grammy made for a long time while I was growing up, but I do now. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Have you done any research on West Coast knitting and the Salish knitters on Vancouver Island?
I haven't done a lot of research. I know about them. I do know they won a court case against Ralph Lauren a few years ago. But I don't know much about that history. I have a book, but I'm not an expert in that, no.
But it just would be interesting to do a little bit of a comparison of those knitting traditions.
Yes, yes.
Anyone else?
So far, no questions online.
Okay.
Lynda, thank you. That was
Thank you so
beautiful.
much.
Getting lots of comments on chat about it. So bravo.
So we have a few minutes left. If there's any questions that come up, I might just kind of take the iPad around and see what people are doing in the room. If people are still okay with that. I asked them beforehand and they said yes. So.
We will start here. Just introduce yourself and show me what you're doing.
I'm Karen McGuigan. I'm doing pearl sew hollows, arched gusset mittens.
Arch gusset, neat.
So it has a little arch.
Neat. I like that. Very nice. Are you knitting? You're not knitting now? So, oh, I better take the mic with me. Who else is knitting here?
I am just knitting caps, which I pump out about one every 2 days in the winter when I'm not rug hooking. It's good pastime, and I get the little white pom-poms and give them as gifts.
Perfect. And what are you making?
I'm making another petite knits Elizabeth sweater.
Oh, like the
or
one
blouse,
you're wearing?
like the one I'm wearing, only this one's got a longer collar. It's for my daughter.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
I made my grandson a sweater. Sorry, you can't see it. Made my grandson a sweater in this yarn. And my son-in-law told me my daughter would love one. So here we are. That's her Christmas present, hopefully.
Beautiful. And what are you doing?
I am doing a hat. It's a pattern by Anna Shu, who runs a shop called The Hat Junkie.
Oh, the hat junkie. She was here. Yeah.
So anyway, I did this one last week and this one again.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
And are those, did you make those mittens?
No, my very talented daughter did them.
Oh, gorgeous. And what are you making?
Well, I'm working on a cow, which is a Rowan Connect pattern. So I'm just working on the chart, and
Can you see that?
the only way I can do this, I haven't done Farrell for quite a while, was to take colored pencils and I mark my colors and mark the lines. And now that I've got it going, it's working well. So.
Perfect. Wonderful. And you?
That's an enormous Stephen West pattern.
Oh, gorgeous.
So it's only about a third done.
They're
They're huge.
Yeah, they are huge.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Well, I'm doing a hat by Danielle Turnbull. I was lucky enough to go to Orkney and Shetland this summer in September, and so I'm just making a hat from that pattern. Yeah.
Did I go too fast or can you see?
Getting in close to see, yeah, you have to hold things right up.
I'm finishing up the thumb of a ivy leaf mitten pattern.
Oh, that's gorgeous. And I will come around.
I am knitting a twisted affair hat. It's a free pattern by Joji Locatelli.
Okay, nice.
Hold it right up in front of you.
Right up in front of this.
Yeah.
There.
And
Perfect.
it's a twisted affair.
Oh, nice.
I don't think you see it. Yeah.
There we go. Perfect. And you put your knitting away?
I didn't bring any.
Oh, you didn't bring any? Can we see that?
Sure. Hi, I'm Paula, and it looks like I'm knitting a giant mitten, but it's going to get felted.
Felted?
Yes, I'm going to put in a plug for Kim. I went to the PEI Fiber Festival in early October and was lucky enough to get in the class for double knitting with Lucy Neat.
Oh, I took that
And
class.
so I've done a hat and I'm doing all kinds of little bits, and now I'm doing a pair of mittens in double knitting. But I can't give you the pattern because I took two patterns and mashed them together.
I'm hoping to cast on Lucy Neatby's Happy Stitches double knitting mittens. They're gorgeous. And I'll move over here. And what are you knitting?
She didn't ask me about this.
No, she's my mom, so I didn't ask mom.
I'm knitting a mitten for my granddaughter for Christmas.
Very nice. And you're knitting? Can you see this?
I'm more of a dysfunctional knitter, so I'm knitting pots.
Oh,
So I
nice.
knit these little pots, and I have a secret process where I end up encrusting them with sand, and if you can. Oh, gorgeous! And then really, they don't break. They look fragile, but they don't break.
Oh, excellent. Very cool. And what are you doing, Bev?
Hi there, my name is Bev, and I'm working the little corner boy. Am I up here in any way? I can't find the camera. Little corner boy mitts from the saltwater mittens.
Perfect. And Lori, do you want to show your?
Yes, it's a really fantastically complicated dishcloth. And somebody's stocking this Christmas. Thank you, Cheryl.
I figure if I was forcing Mom, I was forcing everyone else. How are we doing for time?
We have 7 minutes left. So I've taken, and I'm using a cotton, and I have a secret process. So then they get soaked in a special mix, and then I fill them with sand. The sand creates the shape, but also gets encrusted in them, so they're inside. And then when it's dried, I'll pour out the sand, and then you end up with this, looks like a sea urchin. But as you saw, it doesn't break. I can throw them across the floor. That's great.
Thank you, Jane. That's Jane Whitten.
And Cheryl, what are you knitting these days?
I have 2 sweaters and a pair of socks to finish for Christmas. So I just have a small little bit to do in the next week. Yeah. But I didn't pull it out today because I was too buzzy around doing everything else.
I have a question from online. What is the name of the pattern of the bird mittens that were passed around? That would be these.
Yep, it's the songbird mitten.
Songbird mittens.
Yeah.
And I have said her name 1,000 times, but now I can't come up with it. So if you just go on Ravelry, you'll find her pattern. It's I think it's is it Erica Hauser, I think. Okay. Yeah, but anyway, it's the songbird mitten pattern.
Perfect. Well, I think we're winding up here. This has been absolutely terrific to see so many knitters and to see what you're all knitting. I've heard all of these pattern people, they must be designer pattern makers. I must check them out. We will be posting the recording online, both at our islandstudies.com website, as well as on the University of the Highlands and Islands website. Andrew, if you're still there, maybe you can pop your URL into the chat and I'll do the same. And yeah, thanks. So we have 3 of them there already, so you can see what other people have done from Uist and from Holar, Iceland, and from St. John's, Newfoundland. And Andrew, if you're there, who else wants to do it? You told me somebody.
Well, there's some knitting groups here in Shetland are interested, so we can get something organised here. Get a hall, get some local knitters in, and get some stories going as well. So yeah, hopefully we can get somebody from Norway as well. So I just wanted to all this talk about mitts and gifts. Our Norwegian friend Kari from the west coast of Norway, when she came to visit us, and she had knitted 2 very beautiful mitts, one for a pair for myself and a pair for my wife as well. So they're just to add to the mitt collection that we're looking at today. Yeah.
They are gorgeous. Getting lots of ahs and oohs here if you couldn't hear it. All right, well, if that's everything, I am just absolutely thrilled to see so many people here, so many people online, and stay tuned. I have captured all of your email addresses. We'll be passing them on to the next host of Yarns and Yarns, so you'll hear about our Yarns and Yarns events as they come up, as we keep building this wonderful network of North Atlantic island knitters and storytellers. So thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much.